It's not okay for anybody to take advantage of you in any way. Finding a way that you feel comfortable to speak up, but to say something, because if you don't say something, it continues to happen. And silence is making things okay. Think about the people around you and the actions of those people doing that on others.
Gab, welcome to the She Sells podcast. I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. I'd love to learn more about your role and what you're doing today and how you've actually got into this role from the very beginning of your career.
Sure, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm feeling very privileged to have this opportunity to speak to people about my experience. And at the moment, I'm working for the City of Melbourne. I'm heading up the marketing and digital team in Experience Melbourne. So essentially, the remit is really across tourism and events for the city, all the major premier events like Moomba, Now or Never, Fashion Week, Firelight Festival, also destination marketing. So positioning Melbourne as a number one city for leisure activity. Oh yes, I shouldn't forget also the What's On website, which is essentially a website that's a city guide that educates people on what's on in the city.
I use that all the time.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, always checking out what's on.
The team in my team that work on that are absolutely extraordinary, and quite recently won a few Umbrella Awards and other awards for that. So we're very proud of the team. But coming into the City of Melbourne, I mean, if I was just to start there and sort of work backwards, that was essentially at a point in my life where we were in lockdown and quite a few things had happened where I had moved on from the industry I'd been in for 12 years, which was the film industry, working across local production. So heading up, I guess, all of the marketing for films that had been made in Australia. I'd left there to go to sort of my dream job. It didn't quite work out. I ended up in a situation where I was working for an organisation based in Sydney, and because of the lockdowns, I couldn't travel. I started to feel quite isolated, and I really missed having a team and that local connection. And I sort of started to think, well, I need to be around people more, and I was looking online and a job came up at the City of Melbourne to do this role, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. I got the job and went into the City of Melbourne to relaunch the city, I guess, after 262 days of lockdowns. You know, retail spend in the city had gone down by 93%. I did start my career in London at the Mail on Sunday, and I was working on events there. Came back to Australia and wanted to work in a newspaper again because that's sort of where I'd cut my teeth. I went to the Herald Sun. I didn't quite really know exactly what I wanted to be doing. I just knew that I knew newspapers now, so I'll go there. Yeah, then I started to think, I'm not quite sure that was necessarily where my sense of purpose was lying, that I was getting that sort of feeling of like contributing to something bigger and deeper and something that motivated me beyond, you know, my pay packet. And so I started to think, okay, well, what does that look like? And I found myself working in Census, which was part of Telstra at the time. It was the digital arm of Census, and I worked on a website called City Search, which was very much like What's On. So it's quite funny to go from City Search back in, I think it was like 2007, to be working on another city guide all these years later. I got made redundant, actually. I found out that I was being made redundant via Facebook, which was quite interesting. Weirdly, like just weeks before going on the holiday, a recruiter had reached out and said, we're sort of headhunting and we'd heard a few names and we thought it would be good to come and have a coffee. And so while I was away and that happened, I reached straight out to that person and I said, you wouldn't believe it, but I've actually, found myself kind of in a situation of not having a job. So when I got back, I went and met with this recruiter, and through that recruiter, he knew someone who was recruiting for a film distributor called Madman Entertainment. And he said to me, look, your CV is way more kind of entertainment rather than like finance and banking and the area he covered. I'm going to refer you to this person. You should go meet them. So anyway, they had this job at Madman Entertainment. I hadn't done anything in film before. From there, I went from Madman into roadshow films and then into Disney, into a PR agency that was specialised in film. So that's kind of, yeah.
Your career spans across media, newspapers, film, entertainment, PR. That's really amazing. Since you started in your career way back when, all the way through to today, do you feel like the way that women are seen within those industries has changed? And what would you say the key differences are from then to now?
I think absolutely. There's definitely some significant changes. I think a lot of the broader zeitgeist has had a lot to do with changes. So people speaking up, the Me Too movement, people talking about how it's okay to say something. I think, launching into a career that was in an industry that was very male dominated, rife with sexual harassment. It was a very sort of fast paced, do what you're told, get the job done, hit your targets kind of industry. I feel that even though that's still there, obviously profit's always going to be at the heart of any corporate job. I do feel that there's a move towards embracing an opportunity to be your real self, to be authentic, to show up in the room and lean in. I think, lean in being such a huge success, something that spoke to the heart of so many women have been in rooms and have not felt they could. It gave people permission. And I think that it's shifted a lot. I think that people recognizing the importance of focusing on their mental health and delving deeper into their why, access to content through podcasts, through all of these different sources that allow us to be able to hear that we're not the only ones having that experience. I think it's allowed people to be way more accepting or understanding that they should say what they want to say and they should be themselves. And I think that's changed the environment. I still do think that there's a way to go with a lot of things. My experience going from corporate into local government and that kind of culture shock was really interesting, and the difference in those leadership styles as well.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on that actually. When I first decided to start this podcast originally, the She Sells podcast was meant to showcase women in leadership, specifically in sales and marketing. But since having had many conversations with females like yourself, the conversations do end up down what I would call a rabbit hole that none of us want to go down, which is around this sexual harassment. And across multiple different industries, whether you're talking accounting and finance, media, tourism, it doesn't matter. There's so many stories that I've heard just through conversations with women. And what I know is that it's still going on today. And I know that, us as leaders, we've been there, we've been through the years. Would you say if someone was dealing with a situation at the moment in the current day, what would you advise them? What would you suggest in the best way to handle those situations?
I think the first thing I'd say is it's absolutely not okay, no matter what. And not to have any doubt whatsoever that it's not okay, because it's not. It's not okay for anybody to abuse you in any way or take advantage of you in any way, regardless. And that's something I've had to kind of learn myself, just through relationships that I've had, my sort of, my own traumas and my own, I guess, attachment style and things that I've put up with. And I think I would say to anyone in that situation, it's not okay to speak up, but to obviously, reflect on how you feel comfortable speaking up, because I do recognize again that some people might feel a little bit, not as I guess able to say something because it's not their natural personality to speak up or to have conflict, and it's not so easy. So I would say that, finding someone they trust that they could, speak to. I think that having a psychologist really helps, having someone, a therapist of some sort that you can speak to and get advice on how to frame it and present it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. Yeah. That's something in my life that I absolutely 100% recommend is seeing someone on a regular basis to talk about your mental health. And so much comes up, and if that was happening at work and that came up, there's no doubt that my psychologist would be giving me some great advice. So knowing it's not okay, finding a way that you feel comfortable to speak up, but to say something, because if you don't say something, it continues to happen. Yeah. And people think, and silence is making things okay. And I think I would just say for everybody else, even if you can't see that you're worth it, which you are, but if you can't see that you're worth it, think about the people around you and the actions of those people doing that on others, and maybe that's a way to sort of give you the drive or motivation to speak up. It can be really, really harmful, even just in so many ways you probably don't even realise.
I mean, we talked about it previously on our call about certain situations that have come up over many years of being in the industry that you've been in. I think it's a shame that happened in the first place. and just knowing how to handle those situations. And time again, we keep saying, speak up, don't let it slide. And I think that's super important to make sure that you don't shrivel and keep it to yourself, because there's no way we're going to make any change if you do. In the organisation that you're in now, you talked quite a bit about how the generations that are coming through are much more vocal than we used to be. So tell me a bit more about that.
I've definitely noticed. So partly I think it is coming from a more autocratic, authoritative type of leadership style that's generally seen in the corporate world to a more servant, sort of people-focused leadership culture that I've noticed it's quite different, because I was really just trying to understand, why does it feel so different in the local government council culture versus where I had been before, and having to adjust to that. And
so private versus government.
Private versus government. Okay. And in unpacking that, it became very evident that in the City of Melbourne, they do focus on really genuinely putting the employee at the heart of the practices, really empowering employees, looking leadership through the lens of empathy, development, really sort of trying from that perspective, and giving employees permission to speak up. And, there's signs around the building that, say things around, we respect all gender, definitions, or how people, see, define themselves from a gender perspective. There's lots of opportunities to talk about psychological safety. It is just absolutely not okay in the culture of the City of Melbourne to do any of those things, and they make it very, I guess, obvious that they don't support that, and they give you tools to be able to speak up. So I think there's that. And I just think generally speaking, there's change in the way that people are starting to feel, like the younger generation are starting to feel that they shouldn't put up with it, and they're seeing other people speak up and they're like, no, that's not okay. And so you really have to take a step back and go, okay, you're right, check yourself, Gab.
Yeah
that's not okay. And so and even just things that our parents would have said it to us. And I start hearing myself going, oh, back in my day.
But we didn't have any of this.
Yeah.
We just didn't. I've just remember so many occasions where I felt like I couldn't speak up. Have you got any examples that personally that you've gone through where you wish you had spoken up?
There's heaps, which is sad. And I didn't speak up because I felt like I didn't want to come across as not being someone who fitted in. I didn't want to be seen as uncool. I was young and impressionable and kind of wanting to be one of the crew. And so I think when it happened, I just kind of laughed it off. And also just because it felt so like that was the norm. So it just happened. And I didn't even really half the time even notice it being that bad until it was a few times where it was really, really kind of obvious. And, like one manager once saying to me that after wanting to talk to him about, I'm like, I really need to talk to you about something really important to me. And I'm thinking, I just want to ask him for a pay rise because I was feeling,
just get the courage to ask for a pay rise.
Yeah. And he was like, well, I really want to speak to you about something too. And I was like, okay, you go first. And he was like, oh, well, last night I dreamt about you. And I was like,
I dreamt about you?
Well, yeah, more, yes.
Wow.
And I was quite shocked because I was like, aren't you married? And I've got a partner and you're my boss and this is really weird. And, and I just laugh it off and I'm like, oh yeah, no, but I've got a boyfriend and I can't do that. And then he was like, oh, we could just spoon, you could just come to my room and we could spoon because we were away at a conference. And I just sort of brushed it off and that was it. And then you just don't even think about it again. It's just like a moment that happened.
Yeah.
So I kind of do. And there was a situation where I did speak up once, quite a number of years later, after seeing the impact of some people's behaviour get called out and then them get in trouble from the organisation and actually you have to pay sort of money out to.
So someone finally spoke up and raised awareness around the issue and there was a payout situation.
Yeah, there was a thing that happened and so that happened and then fast forward to another situation and a thing happened that was quite uncomfortable in terms of something that was said, and I said to the person, look, I just wanted to give you a heads up that what you said wasn't appropriate and just to be careful because this happened in the past and the person actually got taken to court and this happened and just so you know, be careful. And then I found as a result of that, and maybe it's not exactly that and maybe I'm making excuses now even just talking about it, but I did find soon after that, apparently my work was no longer as up to scratch. I was getting a little bit in trouble from the head of the department on how disappointed he was that my attitude had changed. And all of a sudden, somehow,
Wow.
and so I don't know if it was that, but I do largely think that it was connected to that. And that's why you fear speaking up, because there's going to potentially be some implications if you do. So I don't know if that would have changed now. That was quite some time ago, and maybe in the last 10 years it might have changed. And if you speak up, maybe people take it more seriously. But at the time, that's what happened.
Yeah, I think that feeling of a shift in dynamics purely because you spoke up, your intuition is so high and it's likely to be right.
Yeah.
So to feel like, to say you don't know, but you had a feeling, I think that you should rest easy knowing that is something that probably was a ripple effect of you speaking up to that person.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate that happened. And it's really unfortunate that it keeps happening and there's still more stories. It's really frustrating. But I think that you spoke about psychological safety, and you as a leader, you have a team. How do you go about creating psychological safety in your team?
It's mainly been around trying to create an environment people feel safe to speak up, giving lots of opportunities for one-on-ones and chats and being open and sharing, I guess, myself more openly and being vulnerable. I think trying really hard to make it known that it is totally acceptable to say you don't want to do something as much as you do, because that's also, I think people have always felt that they need to just say yes because you're the manager. Definitely noticed that's an absolute difference in current place of employment, and I think that difference in the servant leadership versus the autocratic leadership style. My team have largely a very strong they feel very comfortable to say, no, that's not good, or the team don't feel comfortable, and it's listening and going, you know what, actually, thanks. Probably not the time to say X because you told me that, even though I was all gung-ho we were going to go down this route. I mean, nobody's perfect, and there are times where I don't show up as my best self in a meeting, and I say something that's potentially upsetting, and it's just no one's perfect. You can't get
awareness.
it 100% right.
Yeah,
yes.
I think definitely having more awareness, and I think as women in these situations we naturally create quite a nurturing environment, and where we can be, some of us, a lot softer in that approach. I think that I wonder what that would look like if it was a male leader and how they might be able to create a nurturing environment.
That's a really interesting one, actually. Predominantly in the branch that I work in at the moment, it is a lot of women.
Yeah.
Only a few who are male, and I was just trying to think of some of the leadership styles there, but the people that I do work with that identify as male, they say that I wouldn't notice real difference in their style so much, because I think that they are also given the feedback around the ways to behave and encourage the best out of teams. And I think, it's just not accepted to not accept people the way that they show up at work, because of the way that the organisation has really tried to put the employee at the heart. So I think that's a good thing. I mean, of course, there's long way to go there too. Nothing's perfect in that environment. But I just think that at least reminding employees on a regular basis that they value psychological safety, giving training on it, making managers really aware of what that means, giving us principles to sort of, work.
That's amazing.
Work to.
It sounds like it's coming from the top down, and it's all across the whole organisation, which is really wonderful to hear. And I'd love to see, perhaps more on the private side of things that being adopted. I'd love to talk a little bit more about the marketing side of things, managing a team. How big is your team?
So there's 21 of us.
Wow.
In marketing and digital.
One of the things that we spoke about yesterday was having the skill set that you need today that you probably didn't need to have like 20 years ago. Now we have to be so diverse that we've got to have AI, social media, digital, ads, MarTech, B2B, B2C, all of the things happening. How do you as a leader feel like, is that really overwhelming?
100%. It's so overwhelming, but I think it's generally not any different to any point in time. Things are always changing. It's, I think, again, around being curious and one of the things I came to realize, a big thing that people talk about is, imposter syndrome, and you've always got this feeling you're never going to know as much as anyone else. And as you get older, well, as I've gotten older, I've found it even stronger in my head with changes in technology and, they're going to think I'm not as in touch because I'm not a young, 22-year-old coming in with all the knowledge of digital. We're all learning. Nobody has experienced AI before. It is a new frontier for all of us. So it's an equal playing field, and not to feel that you're not as knowledgeable, because we're all learning. I think it's about the attitude behind that, the curiosity to learn. I think some of the things that are coming as a result of the changes in AI are going to make our work so much more efficient, and processes around, some of those sort of more basic tasks being automated. I think some of these things around personalisation and uber personalisation, a big area that I'm super interested in, which I think will come largely to a massive sort of peak of interest, is ethics and governance around that. It's already obviously a huge topic, but I just think, we really have to start thinking about what our ethical and I guess governance policies are going to be to set our sort of moral compass around as an organisation, and whether leadership styles and just styles of kind of cultural styles will adopt different ethics around that. I don't know, but I do know that, if there's going to be the introduction of, predictive sentiment and analytics and data that's sort of done from a predictive perspective, and consumer behaviour that's done from a predictive perspective, what degree of accuracy is it not accurate? Inaccuracy, is that the word? And then what does that mean ethically? So are we just making assumptions, but there's a percentage of inaccuracy that we're making an assumption on that's unethical, or how do you sort of, work through some of those things? So I think that's going to be a big thing for the future. And I think it's just understanding this next phase of the world and that we live in. What are the opportunities it's going to create? A lot of new jobs. I mean, my daughter the other day, she said to me, she was on Canva doing her first thing on there. She's making a magazine. She's 10. And she goes, "Oh, Mum, is it bad that I used AI?" And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean bad?" And she goes, "Well, I used it to help me make the magazine." And I was like, "No, you should use AI. You should learn everything about AI because you're going to need to know that. So go and use it as much as possible. That's the point of it." And it was just interesting to see that her point of view is, "Oh, is that bad? Like I'm cheating?" Well, no, because
it's such a difficult one. I imagine as a parent to be coaching your daughter on go use the AI, but also use your own creativity as well, right? Because I can remember trying to create my own newspaper or magazine. Like I wanted to be a journalist back in the day, as we were talking about newspapers before. So it's interesting the way in which we're encouraging the use of AI, but you were talking about before the AI and the machines learning and looking at sentiment analysis. But as humans, how are we analysing that as well? And are we more analytical in a different way than a machine would be?
Yes.
I think that there's so much around that AI conversation at the moment. Is there anything that makes you worried about it or excited for it?
I think obviously with everything there's there's good and evil. Some people will use it for opportunities that are not so good for humanity, and some people will use it for, or some ways in which it will be used, not necessarily people, will turn out to be good things. Again, same age-old problems that the world challenges, that the world faces. I think it's really around leaning into it. It's happening. You can't stop it. So you have to lean in and you have to learn. This is my perspective anyway. And that's why with my daughter, I'm like, you learn as much as you can. You use it as much as you can. That's your future. That's your kid's future. Even though it's happening at a rate at which most transitions or revolutions have happened, or revolutions have happened, with new technologies is happening at a rate that we've never experienced before. Again, it's happening. So we have to just accept it, lean in, learn, and try our best to set up the governance and the ethics around at least trying to do it for the good of humanity. I think at the end of the day, that's the thing we're probably the most scared about, is how is it going to, be destructive? And I think we all genuinely want to create a better future for ourselves. So I think that's probably what's at the core of it. But I think it's up to leaders to make sure that they do ask the questions and challenge and make sure that it isn't going to be just for profit driving outcomes, I mean, obviously everyone wants to make profit, and that's what's hard, because at the core of it, it can translate to something being, maybe not so good. But I just think that it is up to leaders to have perspective on always questioning whether they do genuinely, ethically think it's the right thing to do, but you can't avoid it, so lean into it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So we talk a lot about women in leadership. What I'd love to ask you is there been any situations in your whole career where you have been championed by a man that you felt really empowered by them?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had some really great champions. One of the CEO of a company that I was working for not too long ago, he really got behind me and helped me to, believe in myself. And he was always pushing me to sort of lean into opportunities for women in film. Also at that same company was another person who actually headed up all of the Australian film content development. And, he saw this opportunity to go for a grant through the Natalie Miller Fellowship, which is a fellowship in film to support women leaders who are at points in their career where a little sort of training course or an opportunity to get a mentorship will help their career. So I looked at the criteria and I didn't fit all the criteria of the things, like how long I'd been in film, I think it was, something like that, a technicality. And he was like, his name's Seth, and Seth came to me and he's like, Gab, you should apply for this. I was like, but I haven't been in film for as long as, he's like, Gabby, he's American, he's like, Gabby, you gotta go for it. So I was like, okay. And then I rang Screen Victoria, and I said, oh, look, just wanted to get some advice here, and they said, well, look, actually you do fit the criteria because you've got all of these things that you have done have brought you to where you are in the film industry, and that is relevant. So they gave me some advice, and then I did qualify, and then I actually did get a grant, and I went and studied at Oxford, and I did a course called Women's Transforming Leadership. It was absolutely unbelievably inspiring and so good, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity. But that was because Seth stood in and he said, believe in yourself, apply, so I think that's an example of that.
I love that. And I think that as women, we always doubt ourselves a little bit. So it's really great that you were endorsed, encouraged, and there should definitely be more of that. We've also talked about unsupportive women and environments where that's been quite toxic. Tell me about that. I know you've got some thoughts around that.
Definitely. There's a lot of really great women out there that genuinely have your back, and they're like always giving you advice at times you really need it. And I have so many of those amazing colleagues throughout my career that I've worked with that are always like, in your times of doubt, they're in there like, you're amazing, come on, and they're really, they're great. But I have also had, some people that for whatever reason, haven't been supportive, and that has really played an impact on my personal, mental health at the time, my self-doubt. I had a particular situation with the person that I was working with, and when we were sort of equal level colleagues, we were friends, and I felt like we really had each other's back. And then a situation occurred where this person left to go on maternity leave, and it was always sort of described that there was a very good chance that I would step into her role. We'd sort of, giving each other, and then all of a sudden that opportunity was no longer on the table, and someone else was brought into the role, and it was this weird kind of feeling of like, not being supported. And I don't know if it came from a place of fear on the other person's behalf or what it was, but it made me feel very conflicted, because I was like, I thought we were really good friends. I thought you had my back. And then it really took me a little while to get over it. But the good part about the situation was, it brought out the fight in me to go, no, I'm going to believe in myself. I'm not going to let that get to me. But I really did feel that situation was not great. I had another situation with a girl who was just being really like mean and not nice, and I kept thinking, oh, does she not like me? I'm pretty sure she doesn't like me. And I said to another colleague, I'm pretty sure that girl doesn't like me. She's like, oh, you're imagining it. And then we were downstairs doing something in getting some lunch at the Mail on Sunday. This person came over and she was really rude. And my friend goes, yeah, she doesn't like you. She doesn't like you, Gab. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to address this. So I called her up.
Imagining it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I rang her up and I said, hey, look, said person, have I done something to upset you? Because this happened. And she was like, yes, well, you've been here for 2 minutes and already you got a promotion, and I've been here longer, and you shouldn't be working on that because I've been here longer. And I was like, whoa, okay. And so there was a lot of stuff going on over there. And I think I came to realize that I'm not saying none of it was my, I did nothing or whatever. What I'm trying to say is sometimes you just don't know what's going on for the other person, and maybe their behaviours are because they're feeling threatened or whatever it is. Yeah. And to try to maybe realise that, but it's not cool, and don't do that to people.
Yeah.
Back people, pay it forward, be supportive. Like, we've had it hard enough as women to get to an even playing field. We have to champion each other and get in there, and really, we've got a long way to go. Like, we need to help each other.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there's definitely been environments where the female leadership has perhaps been, unfortunately, more toxic than you might get from your male counterparts, which is so disappointing. It's one that also knocked my own confidence as well, so I can completely understand that. You have a daughter, right? If you were advising your daughter what she could do to help her career over the next 20 years, her future, what would you say to her and other women in the industry?
To believe in yourself and to try your best to not listen to the negative voices, but harness the strong positive voices in there that tell you you are great and you are capable and you are someone worth it. Because I found that there were times where I really struggled to believe that. I remember a time when I was walking into work one day and I was having a real challenge with a manager, and I started thinking about Kylie Minogue and how they used to call her the singing budgie. And they were like, she's just a singing budgie and this and that. And I remember thinking, well, look where she's now. And everyone said she was a singing budgie, so whatever. And kind of really, looking for those role models that have fought through that self-doubt, I think it holds us all back a lot.
I think that, you yourself are a role model, having a team, being a female leader. I really appreciate the conversation that we've had today. You really opened up and showed us vulnerable side of being a female in leadership. And I think that's going to inspire a lot of women as well. If women do want to reach out to you, or not just women, but anybody would love to find you, where can they find you? Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, absolutely. Reach out on LinkedIn. I think that's the best mechanism. And I'm very happy to talk to anyone that, feels that they really need some advice in that space. It's, really challenging. I think it's really important that we recognise we're just human, and we all make mistakes, and none of us are perfect, and there are times when we're going to be imperfect. But as long as you, just realise that every action we take has an impact on other people, and be conscious as humans that the way that we operate has an impact on other humans, I think that we will recognise where our behaviours are right and wrong. And when we think about those behaviours on humans, think of yourself as one of those humans, the positive voices that you need to say to yourself. Like, would you say to other people, you look terrible today, or you're not very good? No, so don't say it to yourself. I mean, I can honestly say that I suffer from that. But someone recently said to me, stand in front of the mirror and say things like, I'm beautiful, I'm amazing. Don't look at yourself and say, oh my gosh, look at my wrinkles, I look so old. Or, oh my gosh, like positive self-talk.
Yes.
Try to, be your best support.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day,
no one else is going to do it
no,
for you.
you need to be your number one support, but just it's not that easy sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I like that you said that, what you say really impacts other people, but the lack of saying stuff also impacts other people. So
100%,
speak up.
100%.
Thank you so much for the session today. I really, really enjoyed it.
It's been great.
Thanks, Gab.
Thank you.